Okay, so we're brought up in a weird spot here, where before sex is called foreplay, but after sex, there's no real name for that,
Mm.
and we're kind of just here basically cuddling with our robot counterparts for our side stitch this time around. Um, so we just want to be able to acknowledge in this small 20 to 30-minute period that we're going to do here, that in our full episode where we try to keep things to hopefully no more than an hour, maybe hour and a half at the most, uh, there's apparently just been way too much of humans fucking robots for us to cover in that hour and a half time period of an episode. So here's a few other things that have happened during our lifetime that we thought like, hey, let's acknowledge these things too, and kind of where they fit in that spectrum of the evolution of human and android relations. When we had, again, we talked about how like it really started as this uh terribly misogynistic way of men basically building their perfect woman to have basically subjugated to them, to looking at where is the line between humanity and robots, and what that means for like actual relationships, to how can we see the successful modern relationship played out with a human and a robot. So Mark, I think you had some good notes, or some good things to share about a Robin Williams classic this time, right?
Yeah, I absolutely did. And to mention your point of just having so much stuff to draw from, which is both interesting and kind of humiliating for the human race at the same time. there's there's a lot of stuff that just it just falls to the cutting room floor here. So we couldn't go through all of these things, but we had a lot of properties though that had some pretty relevant, paths that kind of crossed, right?
Hmm.
Um, so for one of them though, so you mentioned the Robin Williams classic Bicentennial Man. It came out in 1999 and was based on a novella, actually, or a novelette, I believe, from Isaac Asimov. And I believe there's one other person that was involved with it. But either way, I think it was called either The Positronic Man, and then it ended up becoming called The Bicentennial Man. Um, but the reason why we didn't put this movie in the larger episode is because The Bicentennial Man is really more of a heartwarming story. And it kind of goes through this journey of a robotics company that creates like basically like robotic butlers, and they're basically just doing the things that nobody else wants to do
Hmm.
in human society, right? So either way, this robot played by Robin Williams enters this household, and it's pretty apparent by the family, that's actually that owns him, quote unquote, that he's not like every other robot. He actually learns human emotions. He learns empathy, sympathy, sadness, happiness, like all the things that we all experience. And so, what was interesting about Bicentennial Man is that over time, the robot is treated totally differently by this family, right? Like in the very beginning, he's treated just like a servant, like the themes of like slavery and prejudice, those things are very very clear in the beginning, but throughout the film though we get into much more of the love experience between like the robots and the humans here. And it's actually, I don't want to give away the whole movie of Bicentennial Man, but there are certain things that happen with this robot played by Robin Williams where he begins to actually integrate with like human organs, and he becomes more of a quote unquote real person. So it was a really fun pit stop in the research, and it's also a movie I've seen several times. um, but it was really hard to put it into this like pseudo narrative that we were telling, right?
Yeah.
Because we're
Hmm.
because we're telling stories just as much as we're having conversations here. So this movie didn't really fit the larger narrative, even though Robin Williams is his robot character. He does go on to have a very prolific sexual career with one of the characters in the movie. Don't get me wrong. They spend a lot of time together, so
Hmm.
it's assumed that certain things are happening, right?
Hmm.
Um, but it was just such a heartfelt film. I mean, I remember watching it for the first time and I was blown away by it. Um, that I just didn't feel like it quite worked with everything else. So that's why it didn't quite make it in. But if you haven't seen it, or if folks listening to this haven't seen Bicentennial Man, absolutely give it a shot, because it's a wonderful movie.
Yeah. And one that actually I forgot to mention in the movie in that too that actually does do a really good job. And actually really did fit the narrative we had before was actually the Orville.
Oh my God,
Which
yes.
yeah, I don't know how familiar you are with the TV show. I'm really pulling for that third season that's keep rumored to coming out on Hulu. Um, but I mean, it's basically it's more or less Star Trek by Seth MacFarlane.
Hmm.
So it's just got dick and fart jokes put into there every once in a while. And what's kind of great is that that's kind of the criticism of the series initially, but then as the series goes on, like those jokes are there, but they tone down a lot more. And he really has a good sci-fi show out there.
Hmm.
And eventually in season 2, you have Dr. Claire Finn actually develops a relationship with Isaac, who is their equivalent of Data
Hmm.
in the show. Except unlike Data, he doesn't have human features. He is very blatantly a robot. Like very much like he has what looks like his face looks kind of like a microphone, and you can see lit up eyes behind it. Very like metal everywhere, no attempt at skin or clothing or anything. And like it's interesting in that like you have Isaac who's just really wanting to learn more about humanity.
Hmm.
um and because he seems to take interest in Dr. Finn and her family, that's where initially it kind of starts, where she is seeing him as more than just a robot wanting to learn. She's like she sees warmth to it. And then as this like continues on through the season, um, Isaac starts actually changing too. He starts adapting to like this is more than just me getting to know humanity. It's kind of almost like it's very similar to kind of like with Lando, right?
Hmm.
Where he is with his droid, basically just traversing the galaxy, and they spend so much time together. You kind of, as a human, naturally develop feelings and emotions towards something that's basically giving you attention, and that's kind of how it starts between Finn and Isaac, and then it eventually grows into something more. And highly recommend watching the Orville if you have a chance to do it. I think again, the first 2 seasons are still on Hulu, so if you've got that, go there for it.
Once again,
um
not a sponsor, by the way. Not
Not
a
a
sponsor.
sponsor. Hulu has live sports, and those people get paid to say that. So when we say Hulu has the Orville, um we there's no money being thrown our way in that capacity. um
Especially not in a side stitch where someone
no.
here is probably gonna only
Mhm.
listen to this once, or maybe three times if we're
Or
lucky.
maybe 3.
Yeah.
We'll catch the demographics on that as we go, and all the fun math. Um, but also in a vein that actually takes things like back towards that terrible um like man's need to like basically just fuck something like
Hmm.
mentality. We have two other popular properties of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Firefly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So did you watch Buffy when the series was going? I should say that it was the series, not the one movie. Did you ever watch the series?
I've seen a little bit of the series, but when I was reading our production notes for this, I did not know of the specific episode you're talking about.
So what you have in this is you've got Buffy, who is played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. And again, this was a great WB series, formerly the WB, now the CW. um as the main character or protagonist. And then one of the side characters is called Spike, and he's played by fantastic actor James Marsters.
Hmm.
Um, and as the series goes on, Spike is initially is a villain on the show, and then as the series goes on, he's more or less an anti-hero sort of thing, where he's reluctantly helping out everyone else in the series, and he, for some reason, I can't exactly remember why, he develops feelings for Buffy, despite the fact that Buffy is like, this is no, it's not happening. Like, that's no, you're an asshole. Don't even
Hmm.
think about it. Um, and then at one season, there's a point where I'm trying to even remember exactly how it happened. It's lost on me, but he more or less makes a Buffy bot. I'm not sure how or why that began,
Oh
because
no.
this was primarily like a magic based series. It wasn't superly techy until kind of this moment. And then eventually in the spin-off series in Angel, they have some really highly developed androids. But yeah, so Spike makes the Buffy bot, to my knowledge, for the sole reason of having sex with Buffy, because he can't have the real thing.
Oh my
Um,
God. And as you said that, I just looked up
mhm.
the wiki for this. Specifically says the Buffy bot was a robotic replica of Buffy Summers created by Warren Mears at the request of Spike for use as a sex toy.
There we go. It was explicitly for that reason. I do remember at some point in time, Buffy like goes missing in a season,
Hmm.
but they don't want the monsters in the town to realize that the Slayer is gone. So they use the Buffy sex bot to
Oh,
like
they
just basically walk around and pretend to be Buffy for a while. So and I
Jesus
think it does get
Christ.
broken in that process, and Spike is very, very beside himself.
Oh my God.
Hmm.
So it's almost like it's an earlier version of Wanda and Vision, right?
Pretty much, it's the early version of the WandaVision relationship.
Oh my God.
Except at least like for the fact, other than the fact, Wanda actually had legitimate like feelings for Vision. Well, I guess like
Oh, of course.
so did Spike,
Yeah.
but Spikes are pretty much primal.
Absolutely primal. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and that's actually a really good point you make too about the primal side of things, because this is another reason why we didn't necessarily integrate these with the larger episode, right? Because
Hmm.
some of these themes you can find a couple different times throughout media, and oddly enough, like you mentioned with the Firefly movie Serenity, that's also a Joss Whedon
Hmm.
run property too.
Which
Um,
maybe this
you know,
just is a larger Joss Whedon thing.
well, and we could
Hmm.
probably make an episode about Joss Whedon and his bizarre, uh, championing of women at times, but then is also a
Hmm.
harasser of women. And so you're like, what, are you playing both sides thinking you're always going to win? But either way, with this Serenity movie, so David Krumholtz, who I love David Krumholtz. He has like that bit part in Super Bad when he
Hmm.
forces Michael Cera to sing. um, but he's also in like he's in Harold and
Hmm.
Kumar. I don't know if you ever watched the movie or the TV show Numbers, but he was on Numbers. Numbers was a great show too. But either way, he plays a guy named Mr. Universe, in this, in this the Firefly, larger universe, right?
Hmm.
And so he's known for like distributing, like he's basically the YouTube of the Serenity universe, right? Like he's sending out all the videos and all the best stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, he's got a sex bot as well.
Yeah.
And obviously her name is Lenore. She's lovely, she's great.
Hmm.
um but it's the same idea. It's just like Joss Whedon brought us two sex bots and two properties, and
Yeah. Because yeah, it was like he what couldn't find what the I don't know, they don't really give a huge backstory on like why he why Mr. Universe wanted to build a robot, other than like, I don't know if it's just like a weird comment that he's basically just this weird tech nerd that surrounds himself with technology in the close to the middle of the galaxy and sends the message everywhere and bangs his robotic wife.
well, I mean, they do get married.
Hmm.
you know she wrote her own vows,
She
which
did.
were very
Beautiful.
lovely. Yeah, very lovely. I think he even cried about it. There might be some meaning behind Mr. Universe and his solitude, we'll call
Hmm.
it, because just like his mainframe, it's hard to get to. So
Yeah, and
he's
and
on. Yeah.
Lenore was also very limited in what she could do. She was more or less like kind of a mannequin that was acted as a recorder.
Yeah, she was like a talk boy from Home
Mm-hmm.
Alone, except you could fuck it, right?
Yeah.
That's all I got
Which
from it.
I'm guessing was his favorite feature and why he why he was there in the first place.
Once again, it's that age old question of taking a look at robotics and wondering if you can I fuck that
Mm-hmm.
thing? Um, which
Mm-hmm.
is another another good point to make here is the movie Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix.
And
Um,
Scarlett Johansson.
and
She
yep,
is her, I
yep,
believe. Mm-hmm.
Black Widow herself. This movie we didn't choose to really talk about because even though it involved AI, we never truly have a physical
Mm-mm.
relationship here. Despite the fact that throughout this movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, obviously we wish we could provide as many spoiler alerts as we can, but some of
Mm-hmm.
these movies have been a long time, so you just can't do everything.
Yeah. Go see
But
her. Pause now.
yeah,
Watch her. Come back.
yeah, yeah. Pause this moment. Come on back later. Um, yeah. This movie it's about a guy who falls in love with the AI from the operating system on a cell phone or
Mm-hmm.
a computer. I can't remember exactly which, but they develop this relationship and then over time, I mean, I do think it's worth talking about because the AI actually tries to find a surrogate for him
Yeah.
to facilitate having sex with, you
Mm-hmm.
know, which I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I would know how I would react in that scenario, but
It's a little odd, yeah. When your phone is basically trying to find a person as a stand-in for itself.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I'm still taken aback by this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
um, because I don't even really know how to react to it. It's I mean, it's another one of those questions of, okay, I had this great idea, and like let's
Mm-hmm.
just say you're talking to the studio or whatever, you're trying to get money for this movie, and it's like, like you're trying to explain this to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, who is the one
Who?
like going, yeah, you know what? I want to see that.
Let's give it
Uh,
a go.
yeah, yeah. Let's see how this plays out.
Mm-hmm. And I always hope that there's like that one weird like East Coast mook that's there. It's for some reason on the board of directors when someone's pitching this stuff. He's like, so you're telling me you're gonna bring in this guy who wants to fuck a cell phone, and that's the whole movie. That's the whole thing.
And,
Well, not really, but that's what it sounds like. Is you want this guy to fuck his phone? I'm
and
not buying it.
Well, and then you got the other guy though that's on the same panel, right? And this is just like two friends talking at a bar, and he's like, "Hey, you know what, dude? I was talking to the guy just the other day at the hot dog stand, and he was like, you know what? I want to fuck a robot too, but you know what? If
Mm-hmm.
it's a phone, I think I want to fuck it more."
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden, those guys are having an aside, and they're like, "You know what?
they're in
Now
their
we
own
get
weird side conversation.
yep. Now we got a 2 versus 3 scenario here. We're fucking a cell phone. Let's get it done."
And
Yeah.
I think when you look at her, and the overall message it does try setting because, in the end, well, when you look at the beginning, it's a writer who divorced his wife, and then you have this very very intelligent AI that he ends up falling in love with.
Mhm.
And spoiler alert again, he doesn't end up with his cell phone as his significant other. He does end up going back, I think, to try and patch things up with his ex-wife.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason why this is done is it's a completely different message than what the themes we saw in the other movies and properties we talked about, because this is much more technology can't replace that human interaction, no
Yeah.
matter how much it would feel like it could or how good it could feel in any potential moment. It's not going to fill the void in our basically in our humanity that we need to be with other people.
That's correct. Unless that robot is L3-37 from Solo: A Star Wars Story.
3-37, man.
I know I said it once, man, but those cold dead eyes, and you're out there in space, and there's no one else nearby. I mean, I'd probably
Mhm.
still take a hard pass, but somebody else may not.
Someone might not, yeah. And then I don't know, it might be like Data and the Borg Queen. I mean, she gives him skin and propositions him, and he again is fully functional.
And as we all know, resistance is futile. So,
Yep.
I
And
mean,
he did debate that whole relationship for what was it, 0.98 something rattle off seconds, which for an android is an eternity.
It's very true. Which I believe there's a joke to be had there where he doesn't perform for very long, but but to
Which,
him, it's a long time.
yep, which I guess feel free to use that the next time you're with someone and don't last very long. If you are, a dude listening to this podcast, you can just break out that data line. That to you it felt like an eternity. Oh man.
You know, once again, the reason why we didn't bring some of these things up is just because of the parallels that we've already made to a couple of their films. I mean, her was obviously pretty unique in all of this, but
Hmm.
just because of the fact that it was entirely AI driven, there was no like real physical, you know, leap of faith here, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like there was some because I mean, honestly, nowadays there's already like people overseas. There's like a really popular Japanese dating app that like actually does the same thing.
Oh.
I mean, there are people that like, and we're talking like thousands of people who interact with this AI and have relationships with it. And there's actually a Netflix documentary that goes into it, um,
Huh. This
which
is
I can't remember the name of.
this just makes me like wonder, like, do they put the phone with the AI? Like, is there an insert to a body pillow somewhere
I mean,
and they
we
just
can only
mix
assume.
together?
We can only assume, right? I mean, what people do behind closed doors with their AI Japanese love bot. I mean, they can do whatever they want.
That's between them and their AI Japanese love bot.
Yes, they can go ahead and do that. And
Hmm.
honestly, if I can find the documentary for this, I'll post it. We'll post it on the notes here somewhere for folks
Hmm.
to see when they get this. But yeah, I mean that's actually an example of something in movie actually being prevalent in the real world here. So that one might have been good to include, but ultimately it was the physical jump, right? So
Yeah.
we've said it a couple of times, but um, what's actually really interesting though, as we went through that journey, you know, I don't know if I would call it like a radicalization or 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 just like our perversion advancing throughout the years, but Marvel having given us WandaVision, they did also give us a pretty blunt sexual encounter with robots in Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah, they did. They basically had robo hookers.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, literally the Ravagers, are shown, or well, they're not shown having sex with robots, but we're seeing
Hmm.
the cleanup or the finale of that sexual act. And I thought that was kind of funny, in post when we're like going, hey, you know what, Marvel actually didn't just start with WandaVision. They,
No.
they literally had robot prostitution. But
Hmm.
the more I thought about it, the more I just kind of thought maybe this is more James Gunn than it is.
This could be more James Gunn than Marvel.
Yeah, maybe this is more James Gunn than is Kevin Feige going
Hmm.
like, hey guys, I noticed in the whiteboard here that you're having sex with robots. Um, you guys want to elaborate on that? And
Hmm.
James
Yeah,
Gunn is
but
just sitting there and he's like, no.
no. Mm-mm. Nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's a background thing.
Yeah. And then they're like, all right, you know what? That's fine. Let's just talk about Baby Groot for a second because we're going to make a lot of more money off of that.
We're gonna
Yeah.
redirect you to that.
Yeah. So I realized you talked
Mhm.
about the robot sex, but look at Baby Groot.
He's
And
gonna
they're,
dance
yeah.
a lot in this movie.
Like, oh,
How
dear
about
God.
you pick your favorite song from the 70s and we'll make sure that makes it in the film? How's that sound?
He's adorable. I don't even want to think about the horrific implications of robot sex. Let's just go right at it then. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And one that I'm sure we're gonna have to mention here, even with little time we got left, um, that also surprisingly didn't make it to the main one, that may have upset people is probably Battlestar Galactica with the Cylons.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, where basically at the end you didn't know who was a Cylon and who wasn't one.
Mhm.
So as people were like being replaced and there are times you could probably tell exactly when someone was replaced and then you times when you couldn't. Um, which basically again, like there were people with relationships on that show who turns out we're banging robots and had no idea they were even doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and and that's another thing too. Like, there's so many sci-fi properties that kind of wove in and out of this that you pretty much just had to throw at a
Mhm.
dartboard and see which ones you hit.
Yep.
Like Her, for example, Lars and the Real Girl is another one. The
Hmm.
Ryan Gosling, Love Bot one, very similar type of idea. Um, I figured those ones, there's some similarities, so we might as well just go at it. And Real Science was another one of those. If you remember the Real Science movie, and then Real
Real science.
Science also had a TV show.
Isn't that weird
Or
science?
sorry, Weird Science.
Yeah,
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
science.
Weird
Okay,
Weird
how can you
Science.
figure out weird science though? Yeah, the robot genie.
Yeah, yeah. Weird Science was another one of those where I was like,
Hmm.
man, I really want to bring that one into it, but at the same time, it's like we've already got some pretty iconic
Yeah.
80s properties, right? That already
Hmm.
kind of woven in and out of that. So it's just overload at a
Yeah.
point,
And I mean, you'd have weird science. You'd have Elizabeth Hurley in the TV series, who was another, very big star. Prolific actor. But yeah, yeah, no, there's just I don't know how I forgot about weird science.
Well, I mean, it was
Hmm.
sitting out there the whole time, and I figured with the 80s properties we were already going into, like,
Hmm.
we've got enough beef there. Um, but just to list off a couple others, I mean, right around early 2000s was AI, which had Jude Law in it.
Hmm.
And it's another one of those. I mean, I wouldn't say it's not quite in the same vein as a Blade Runner,
Hmm.
where it's another one of those dystopian futures, but it's like futuristic erotic fantasy. It's you know it's there.
Hmm.
And then the other one too, that I was gonna that it's just we didn't end up going into, was Surrogates, which came out in 2009. um this one wasn't like the best reviewed one ever.
Hmm.
um but it was kind of like a way to use robots as avatars, and then the avatars would hurt each other. So it's like, using robots to murder people. Already done that in Terminator. Probably
Yeah,
don't need to talk about that.
probably don't.
But and they're not having sex either, so it's like, we want to talk about the sex, guys. We didn't want to talk about just hurting each other with robots. Like, that's not what we came here
No, that's
to
not what we
talk
came here
about.
for.
Yeah, that doesn't get the people going. But ultimately, yeah, there's so many more examples of robots and the sweet sweet sex we want to have with them, that we thought we wanted to just shed a little bit more light on some of the properties that maybe you're waiting to hear about that just didn't get the light of day. So
Hmm.
yeah, I guess for this one, I think we can put a bow on it, right? As we like to say.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. 1.5 episodes on robot sex is as far as I'd like to take it. But um, I guess if there are things we missed or you'd like to talk about or let us know about, go ahead and let us know. We're probably not going to come back to it. I think we're both done with robot sex. But hey, why not? Why not help our other viewers and listeners with things we missed?
Yeah, and I can say that honestly, I don't want to come back to robot sex unless I'm legally obligated to do so.